Hello and welcome to the Art Class Curator podcast. I am Cindy Ingram, your host and the founder of Art Class Curator and the Curated Connections Library. We're here to talk about teaching art with purpose and inspiration, from the daily delights of creativity to the messy mishaps that come with being a teacher. Whether you're driving home from school or cleaning up your classroom for the 15th time today, take a second, take a deep breath, relax those shoulders, and let's get started. Hello and welcome back to the Art Class Curator podcast. I am so excited to be with you today to talk about one of the most meaningful things to me with works of art, and that is, of course, the emotional, personal connection to works of art. I recently emailed my email list, you might have gotten it, about this new program that I am currently in the middle of called the Art Connection Circle. And the email talked about, connection to art and whatnot, and had you all reply to the email if you were interested in learning more. And I got such amazing, beautiful responses to that email. I can't even tell you. I was just filled with joy reading all of your emails. And I did my very best to respond to each one personally, but one of them really stuck with me. And I thought for sure this is a great podcast topic. So, and I can't find the exact email. I tried to search for it with some terms that I remember us using, but I can't get the exact quote. But basically what the email said was that this person found themselves, when they went to art museums, connecting with art, they found themselves really engaging with the art based on what they knew, but not what they were actually seeing there live in the museum. So I found that to be so poignant because I've seen that to be true of myself in the past too, especially when I was younger, but also, while walking through a museum and observing everybody that's there, you'll see people walking around with a friend or someone, and they're just sharing information that they know about the artwork or the artist. So it's like, here's Van Gogh, this is about his life, this is the colors he liked to use, these are the types of brushstrokes he liked to use, this is the story I know about the artwork, that kind of stuff. And, we as art teachers, we know a lot about works of art. We've taken the art history classes, we've engaged with the works in many sorts of ways, and so we know a lot about them. And so when we go to an art museum, we could fall into this pattern of knowing and engaging with the artwork through that lens. And I don't necessarily think that that's all bad, but I do think that maybe there's another way, and that's what I want to talk about today. And I've told this story recently. If you listened to my interview with Lisa Carpenter a few weeks ago, I told her the story of when I decided to study art education instead of art history. And I'll tell you that again, just in case you didn't hear that story originally, but it's very relevant to this particular topic. So when I was younger, this was in 2004, I was in the middle of applying to graduate programs in art history. I was applying to PhD programs. I'd taken my GRE and I was writing all the essays, and I had my list of places I was applying to, and some of them I had already sent off. And on New Year's Day of 2004, I think I might have said 2014 before, but it was 2004, I visited Houston. So there was, at the time, the MoMA in New York City was being remodeled, and they sent a lot of the art down to Texas. And that was so very exciting for me as a young early 20s person who could not afford to travel to New York City to be able to see these artworks that I knew and loved and that I'd studied and everything. So we drove down to Houston from Dallas area, and in the morning went to the museum and came back in that afternoon, or came back after we saw the exhibit because we couldn't even afford a hotel room. We were pretty broke back then. And when I got to that exhibit, I immediately made, this is not a part of the story that I told Lisa the other day, but the first observation that I made upon entering, the very first room, I believe, had Starry Night in it. It had some Van Gogh, had Starry Night, and probably other artwork from that era. I don't remember what else was in the room. But the thing I noticed was that there was an audio guide, and there were just tons of people because, it was a holiday. A lot of people had the day off. This was a time where people are going to the museum. And all of the audio guide tour stops had just droves of people standing in front of them with the machine to their ear. Now they do it on the cell phones, but back then they had this little head thing this little handheld thing that you held up to your ear and you typed in the number and it told you about the art. And so I noticed that no one was looking at the other artworks. It was only the ones that had audio guide stops. And I thought I was like, wow, that is really interesting. And I didn't have an audio guide. I usually don't get them. And mainly because I want to experience it for myself. And, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. They have gotten really good, though. I've noticed, they'll play music and they're pretty cool. But I like to be with myself and the art without a third party interjecting into my ear. So anyway, I noticed that was the first observation I noticed. And I was like, oh, wow, is that, and it made me start to wonder, is that helping or hindering people's enjoyment of the art? And I think it's probably both, depending on the person. So anyway, that was my first observation. And then what happened next was, so there was this kind of long room that you walked into, and then you turned a corner to get to the next room. And when I walked into that room, I saw Picasso's Girl Before a Mirror, and it knocked me over. I had been aware of the painting before. I had always been a fan of Picasso as one of my favorite artists. I just really always resonated with his art. And I was just completely blown away. I cried. I couldn't leave it. I stayed in front of that painting for so very long. I ended up writing a whole 4-page essay in the car on the way home. No, it wasn't even in the car. I think it was, I don't remember because I didn't have a computer. How did I write it? Anyway, I still have it, so I might read you a bit of it in just a minute. But I was not only mesmerized by my connection to it, I felt a deep connection to the subject matter, the girl looking into the mirror and seeing something not reflected in, not seeing herself reflected back, but seeing this sort of distorted purpley thing. At the time in my life, had felt a lot of social anxiety and had kind of been newly diagnosed with social anxiety. And I really resonated with that message in the painting. But the other thing that I really started to think about was how powerful this connection is to art, how I can look at a painting and I can feel so deeply. It was almost scary how powerful that feeling was. It just overtook me. And it became really the first time that I recognized my deep capacity for art connection. And it made me recognize that one of the first times in my life where I have recognized that more information is not necessarily the right path. I've always been a learner. I want to know everything. I want to understand the world. I'm a constant curious thirst for knowledge and information. And that was one of the first times that I realized that to exist in the question, to exist in the moment was magical. It wasn't I wasn't going there to learn about the art. I was going there to experience the art and to be with it and to learn about myself through my engaging with the art. And that was a really important distinction that I don't know that I had ever really fully realized up until that point. Okay, before I move on to keep talking, I want to share with you a little bit of what I wrote that day because I just think it turns out it wasn't 4 pages, 6 pages. I went and looked for my little essay that I wrote. And so I wrote a whole bunch about other stuff too. I wrote a bunch about my social anxiety and things. But let me talk to you about what I had realized about the painting after I saw it. Okay, so here is a little bit of an excerpt from my essay that I wrote in 2014 after looking at this artwork. As I stared into the stark contrast of the blue and orange mirror frame, my mind started to wonder. I realized that what I was looking at, according to my own eyes and heart, was pure, unadulterated perfection. This painting, with paint so rich and so deep, is perfect. I became scared of it, which is the main focus of why I'm writing about it today, but mesmerized at the same time. Scared of this feeling that it created in me, and scared that this feeling, if I continue to study art history, will never come back. I'm afraid if I stare at it long enough, it will lose this perfection. Additionally, I worry that if I take my eyes off of it for just a second, it won't be the same when I look again. I begin to realize that I don't want to deconstruct modern art and take away its essential meaning and value. I want to leave the mystery in the paintings themselves. I want to see the artworks for what they are and not for the analysis an art historian, who could be me someday, pinned on it. Had I been more familiar with this particular painting, would I have reacted in such a way? If I knew more about the particulars of the subject matter, or that particular time frame in Picasso's life, or what he was thinking about the day that he placed those aqua stripes on the woman's stomach, would it have still knocked me off my feet as it did yesterday afternoon? I fear becoming too close to modern art, that it loses its excitement. Did staring at and deconstructing the man with a pipe ruin the rest of Picasso's similar cubist works for me? I'm sure it did, because at the MFAH I walked right past two works identical in palette and style to Man with a Pipe, because it seemed to be old news. I know I will not have this reaction again to Girl Before a Mirror if I am to someday make it to New York City, because it cannot be duplicated or fabricated again and again. I'm not naive enough to believe that each time I see a work of art I will have the same reaction. Okay, so I go on and on in this essay. I started to talk about artworks that were once exciting to me that now are not because of my education and stuff. So to continue on with Girl Before a Mirror, just to kind of illustrate the truth of this. I don't know, I never have done any research on that painting, but I have seen it 3 times now in person. And each time I had a completely different experience with it. It is really beautiful to me how I can go back again and again to a work of art that I connected to, and I can experience them in new ways. Sometimes they do, lose their magic. Sometimes I do, the next time I don't have sort of a connection, as much of a connection to it. But that connection changes, and then the memory of the past connections kind of join in. So the second time I saw Girl Before a Mirror was another pivotal point in my life. It was in 2014. Oh, it's exactly 10 years later. Well, that is great. I had listened to a podcast about someone traveling around the world, and I realized I deeply wanted her life. I was like, I want to do that. And then what I realized at that moment was I haven't been following my magic, and I haven't been living my life to the fullest, and that I was feeling kind of stuck. And that's the year that I made some really big decisions in my life. I started my business, did some personal work, and one of the first things I did was I booked a trip, and I hadn't traveled in many years. We just didn't have the money to travel for so long. But, I listened to that. I was just like, F that, I'm going somewhere. And I'd always wanted to go to New York City. It was just this place hanging over my head, like I have to go there, and I just couldn't make it there. So anyway, I went there. And on a whim, went there, and it was really a life-changing year. But what happened when I looked at Girl Before a Mirror this time was, I had reconnected with the magic that it had had 10 years before, and it also reconnected with me with my love of art. I had been working in education, I had been working with art, but I had lost touch with that emotional connection. And I had lost kind of touch with myself. And I feel like I had lost myself for a period of time. And I had gained a bunch of weight. That, one of the reasons I didn't travel was that I couldn't fit in an airplane seat. And in 2014 is when I realized I could get 2 airplane seats. And so that was pretty exciting. And at that time, when I looked at the painting the second time, I realized, again, this was me looking into the mirror and not resonating with what I see. And both times there was this feeling of, a disconnect with me, that I need to work on connecting with myself even more. It's like that painting is always a reminder of who I am and who I want to be and how to get there. And it's been guiding me all along these years. And so I can still talk about it with such joy, because it has helped me through my life again and again. This painting has. And, had I known who that was and what was going on in Picasso's life when he did that, and if I had come into the museum that day ready to spout art historical facts about Picasso, I would have closed myself off to that connection. So this story is here to encourage you to when you're engaging with works of art, to turn off that part of your brain that wants to explain, that wants to say, oh, this reminds me of this other artist, or oh, this, this was his blue period, or this was his whatever, or this related to that, and this, and all of that stuff can increase your connection to the artwork. It can provide really cool, interesting stories and value to the artwork. But if you're not careful, that can take away the joy and the spirit and the life and the magic from that art connection. I was talking recently with one of my coaches, and we were kind of talking about this idea of knowing too much. And I was telling, I had told her the story of the girl before mirror, and I had also told her this story of, so I did one time this 4-hour of silence exercise. Highly recommend you try it out. It was brilliant. But so I was going to do 4 hours of silence. And what it teaches you is really what your mind is up to, and how your thoughts are just constantly moving. And, it really allows you to be present with yourself and your thoughts. So I had already done it once before, but the second time I did it, I was at a lake house. We did like a family vacation to a lake house. And this was last year when my girls were doing remote learning. And so they did their schoolwork in the morning, and my husband was working. So everybody was like working. And so I just sort of sat by this window at this lake house and stared out the window. And I was like, no one's allowed to talk to me for 4 hours. I'm just going to close myself in this room. I'm going to sit here on this chair with this blanket, and I'm just going to stare at this window. And so what I realized in that moment is I spent a good hour analyzing a squirrel. Like, I watched every movement of that squirrel. I watched it he just never left the area. It just was like climbing up the tree and eating some nuts. It was just, this squirrel was just hanging out. And I wasn't, in my 4 hours of silence, I wasn't allowed to get out my phone. I wasn't allowed to Google things about squirrels. And so I just allowed myself to exist in my curiosity about that squirrel and exist in my wonder of who he or she is, and how they are, and how they came to be, and what their purpose is on this planet. It was so fun. And I realized too, as the more I know about the world, the more I realize there still is to know, especially with science. I love studying space, and I'm obsessed with watching space shows and things like that. And it just blows my mind that the more we know about space and the universe and everything beyond, the more we don't know. And for someone who's always been kind of a black and white thinker, that there's a right and a wrong, and there's a correct answer and an incorrect answer, these interactions with art and these interactions with information and curiosity and space and psychology, it helps me realize there is no true one answer. And that we can look for those answers within us, and the answers are within us. And that's something I talk about with teaching all the time, that a lot of teachers will resort to telling about the artwork in their classes. They'll give information, they'll tell a story, they'll read a book about the artist to the class, but they don't stop to show the artwork and talk about it. And we're skipping the part that has the most area for growth, the most area for excitement and energy, is that space spent not knowing, that space spent in wonder, that space spent in curiosity, that space spent in conversation, that space spent in just being present with the artwork. Oh, I started to talk about this conversation I was having with my coach, and I just went off on some other random tangent. So what she had talked to me about was she had a father figure in her life that had told her that, when you're, and I'm probably going to butcher this because she was telling me his quote, and then she couldn't remember exactly what he had said, and now I'm rephrasing what she had said about him. So this is kind of like a telephone situation. But that when you're engaging with an object, there's kind of two ways you can do it: externally and internally. So, I think, I don't even know if externally versus internally is the right thing. You can come at it from this place of, okay, what I know about it, what it reminds me of, the art historical information, or we're just saying object. So, what information you know about it, its function and whatnot. Or you can just be present with it and let it communicate with you what it is there to communicate with you about. So when you're engaging with a work of art at an art museum, clear your mind of what you know about the artist. Clear your mind of what you know about the technique. And just allow the artwork to seep into your being. Be with it. Be present with it. Be mindful of it. Notice it. And then you're gonna make those connections. And then you can bring in what you know, and that can add some rich textures to it. But start with just engaging with the artwork with it and take the pressure off. So this is kind of a shorter episode, but it's really important to me. And I think it's important to teach our students to really be present and mindful. Like, I have only just very recently realized that what I'm doing when I'm looking at art is meditation, because I'm a very black and white thinker, and I'm a very right or wrong person. Things are right, things are wrong. And to me, I'm like, meditation is this way. You sit and you clear your mind and you do a body scan or you do a meditation recording, and that is how you meditate. And so any other ways you're being mindful, anyways, I'm being mindful in my life or in front of a work of art or listening to a piece of music, like that's not meditation because I'm not sitting a certain way and doing it this right way. And just allowing myself to view that space as meditation, that space in front of the artwork as meditation, has allowed me to give myself some grace, allow myself to really sink into that presence with the works of art. And it's just a kind of a subtle mindset shift as well. So that was kind of a little bit of a side note. But, I would love to hear your thoughts on this. If you had anything pop up, please feel free to email me at cindy@artclasscurator.com. And if you're interested in having these conversations about art that are about the deep inner work that can come with works of art, I would love for you to join my email list. We have a new freebie, which is a meditation about connecting with works of art. If you're interested in checking that out, you can go to artclasscurator.com/meditation. It is not just for teachers. It is for anyone who is interested in exploring art in this way. Go to artclasscurator.com/meditation. Thank you so much for joining me today at the Art Class Curator podcast. I look forward to seeing you again next week. Bye. Do you remember when you last took time just for you? Not for your students, not for work, not for your family or friends, just you, connecting with your deepest thoughts, emotions, and desires. It seems like there will always be 100 things on the to-do list and a bone-deep exhaustion that makes it feel like doing anything but scrolling on your phone is impossible. You're here listening to this podcast because you know the power of art, but trust me when I say art has so much more to give you, if you'll let it. I'm talking about making space for you, your insights, your memories, your delight, all by using art as a catalyst for deeper connection to yourself and your life. You can get a guide on how to nurture your life and your spirit through art connection, including a guided art meditation, all for free at artclasscurator.com/meditation. Take the time to connect with your deepest self and find your path forward through art. You deserve it. Get your free meditation and guide at artclasscurator.com/meditation. Thank you so much for listening to the Art Class Curator podcast. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and give us an honest rating on iTunes to help other teachers find us and hear these amazing art conversations and art teacher insights. Be sure to tune in next week for more art inspiration and curated conversations.